The pier stretched out like a forgotten tongue into the dark waters, its wooden planks weathered and worn from years of sea spray and salty winds. It was a place where the echoes of laughter mingled with the cries of the seagulls, where the rhythm of the waves created a hypnotic symphony. At the edge of the pier, a lone figure sat, perched on the railing, his eyes fixed on the horizon where the sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold. His name was Alex, a young man with a penchant for mischief and a taste for the thrill of the unknown. The sea breeze tousled Alex's hair as he watched the world go by, his mind buzzing with thoughts of rebellion and defiance. He was a clockwork soul, always teetering on the edge of chaos and order, craving the rush of adrenaline that came with each daring escapade. As twilight descended upon the pier, casting long shadows across the wooden planks, Alex's thoughts turned to the night ahead. The pier, once bustling with tourists and locals, now took on a mysterious allure, a playground for those who sought adventure under the cover of darkness. With a mischievous grin, Alex leapt from the railing and onto the pier, his footsteps echoing against the hollow wood. He made his way past closed shops and abandoned stalls, his senses heightening by the scent of salt and seaweed. At the end of the pier, where the waves crashed against the pilings with a rhythmic fury, Alex found himself drawn to a forgotten arcade. The neon lights flickered to life as he entered, casting an otherworldly glow on the dusty machines and faded posters. With a playful twinkle in his eye, Alex approached a vintage pinball machine, its bells and whistles beckoning him to play. He launched the silver ball with a deft flick of his wrist, his focus unwavering as he chased the elusive high score. Time seemed to stand still as Alex lost himself in the game, the clatter of the ball against the bumpers mingling with the distant roar of the ocean. For a fleeting moment, he was free from the constraints of society, lost in a world of lights and sounds. But as the night wore on and the pier grew quiet, Alex felt a pang of melancholy wash over him. The thrill of rebellion faded, replaced by a sense of longing for something beyond the fleeting pleasures of the night. With a sigh, Alex left the arcade and made his way back to the edge of the pier, where the first light of dawn painted the sky in soft pastels. As he watched the sun rise over the horizon, a newfound sense of peace settled within him, a realization that perhaps true freedom lay not in rebellion, but in embracing the beauty of each fleeting moment.
Wow.
Okay. I thank you.
That was a really nice story time there, Lee. Thanks for...
That's all right. It's quite nice, isn't it? Did you enjoy the all the metaphorical imagery and the symbolisms all humping out of that little story?
Yeah. What do we make of that, guys?
I didn't know you had it in you, Lee.
Oh, thank you. Well, I do short story writing, and that's quite of my style, actually, I have to say. Although it's not mine, it is actually it was written by AI, so none of that was human made.
Or was it?
Or was it? Yeah. So ChatGPT wrote that in 2 seconds. I counted. With a small prompt of Clockwork Orange style short story on a pier. That was it. And it wrote it in literally 2 seconds. So how do we, as creatives, find ourselves? Where do we find ourselves in this place in history with stuff like that going on around us?
Extinct.
Not quite yet.
Well,
welcome to the show.
I mean, it's nice to set a little mood at the top, isn't it? Oh, well, let's go off on a little narrative reverie, shall we? Okay, so do we want to critique the story?
Well, listen, I have read this to Timo already, and the first thing you said was "forgotten tongue," which instantly reminded me of a song called "Forgotten Sons" by Marillion. I thought, man, that would be quite funny, wouldn't it, if you just changed the words around? But "forgotten tongue" is a very strange and odd description of something, which, in a way, I would use, but I wouldn't, because it doesn't actually make any sense, does it, within the context of the story? Unless you're trying to say that the peer's got something to say, but now it doesn't, in which case it's flipping clever.
Wow.
But does AI know how clever it is?
Well, I think that
Of course it does. It's AI.
the forgotten tongue is definitely the story of our demise when we put the lights out as creatives. So we're doing it today, aren't we? We're going to have a look at what AI means to us as creatives and artists, people of our particular generation who grew up without AI but with computers and technology. Is this it? Do we think there's a place for this? Is it the end of all things? How do we feel? We're going to look at a whole range of stuff there. Simon, what was your reaction to the story by our brother Lee?
But it wasn't by Lee, though, was it? You know,
The prompt was mine.
yeah. And the thing is, I'm instantly aware of my own confirmation bias, which is where I'm looking for things in there where they say, yeah, but it's not as good as if a human had done it, or there are bits missing. But actually, it's probably, I don't know. It was the most interesting piece of writing, but then I'm not. I find a lot of people's writing not particularly interesting. So
Thanks, mate.
no, in that respect, no. I knew it wasn't yours, Lee,
Yeah.
because I
That's
didn't
interesting.
hear the nuances.
But did it feel like, I think what we're looking at there is that piece, did it feel like it had a voice?
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't have said that was written by AI. That's so obviously written by AI. It wasn't obvious in the least.
Unless you do lots of them, and then you do see a little bit of a formula in short stories, at least.
But don't you think that by you reading it, Lee, as an actual storyteller, as somebody who dresses up and stands in spooky places or libraries and performs, I was more, even though I read it, and I too on the page could see, oh yeah, no, you can only see that it doesn't really go anywhere. But you reading it, even just there on a webcam, like a very bad sort of, I don't know what subscription channel, very poor. It still created such kind of atmosphere that I was listening along. So it might have been good enough. Is that the phrase?
If that was a short film, it'd be hard to get the ending in, I think. But if that was a short film, Andy, would that actually work as a short film, do you think?
It would need quite a bit of work in the sense that you've got a lot of metaphor in there from, Forgotten Tongue onwards. So the job of a screenwriter is to externalize the internal. So some of it is talking about sort of feelings. Some of it is could be really good. So when Alex finds the abandoned pinball machine and is playing with that would obviously work really well on camera. Other things where the last paragraph where somehow the sunrise turns around his rebellious nature and he's no longer going to be the rebel, he's kind of transformed. You'd have to find a way to make that work in a visual way. You could obviously show the sunrise, you could show some form of change in his expression, but you would have to somehow convey that Alex, who was this rebellious creature, is somehow transformed and reformed. That would be difficult to do as it is on the page at the moment. You would have to demonstrate that he is better. So obviously in The Clockwork Orange, the film, I haven't read the book. It's not a sunrise. It's kind of a psycho brainwashing that he undergoes in order to stop his violent impulses. And then he's tested in the film to see whether or not he will create another violent act, and it's clear that he has changed. So yeah, it could potentially make a really good film. The thing I was going to say actually is that we're all primed because you generated this piece a day or so ago. We all knew going into this podcast that the piece was actually written by AI. The real litmus test would be to give it to other people and find out what their response is. I mentioned on our little private thread, what if you'd been handed this piece of work and said to us, oh, this has been written by one of our kids? I think we'd probably say that's a really good piece of writing, because we wouldn't know. And particularly those first couple of paragraphs, very, very descriptive. I think AI seems to come in strong at the beginning. It knows that a strong opening paragraph is really important to grab the reader's attention. So I think it's
to grab them by the tongue.
Yes.
Yeah.
Grab them by the tongue.
Yeah.
But then it weakens at the end, as you say. It kind of wraps up quickly. But at the same time, with that sort of thing, if you were stuck for an idea, which I think this is the argument at the moment with especially writing, if you're stuck for an idea, you can pop it in a prompt. It'll create a story like this, and it's a jumping off board. So with your film, for instance, you know, how you would describe Alex at the beginning, you'd have him sitting there, the music would be playing, you could see him with a snarl on his face, maybe fiddling with a MacGuffin, a little tiny bullet around his neck showing he's rebellious. And then he goes off and he finds a pinball machine, and it takes him back in time to when he was a kid and he wasn't rebellious, and he, you know, what happened, why was he a rebellious nature? Then he has this kind of like epiphany, and then goes back and decides to drop it into the water at the sunrise. I mean, that's a film right there, right? It's a short film created from something that gave me an idea, and I've thought it in about 3 seconds. Not very good, but that's the power and the positivity that can come from this kind of thing, where you're completely blocked as a writer and you think, what can I do? And it just comes up with an idea, and then you just skim off it and you just, you know, riff off it until it becomes no longer the thing that was written. So you're not really cheating. It's almost like when you're in a room full of people and they throw ideas around at you, and you gather those ideas and then you create something from the ideas. It isn't really any different from that, as long as you don't publish it ad nauseum.
Well,
that's where I'm coming from at the moment.
No, I see. And you basically jumped to the end and sort of concluded very nicely there. So anyway, that we have been the voice from there's this phrase that, you know, people say very sagely, well, it's not a question of whether AI is any good. Is it good enough?
Yeah.
But the question really is that, okay, so good enough for what? That's the positive way in it. It starts a conversation. It starts an idea. Simon, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I very much go along with what Lee was saying. Where I found it useful is, well, I mean, I haven't used it properly yet, but say, for instance, I'm writing a book. Say, for instance, I was writing a book, and I've got essentially the meat of the idea, but then hitting that overwhelm level, which is something that happens to me a lot, where it's too much and it feels like, you know, you see the mountain, but you can't see the path through it. And equally, you look at the top and think, how am I going to get from there to there? Then the AI is extremely good at breaking down a structure for you, because that's the thing. It does analyze things and looks at the structure of them and how things are put together. So then it's able to break down what you've told it and say, well, it could have this chapter, this chapter, this chapter. I mean, the basic task that I gave it fairly recently was to break down my story idea into a 3-act structure, and suddenly it's like, oh yeah, well, that should have been obvious to me, but I couldn't see it because I've got this big ball of jelly in my head that doesn't always play ball, and doesn't always sit like a Rubik's cube.
Our brains are distracted. We're very ADHD in our brains in some respects, and I think definitely with the newer generations being, you know, are looking at phones and they're very quick and they get bored quickly. The AI thing is going to be, it's kind of perfect in a way. It's a tool that can be used very quickly to unlock stuff. But I mean, I don't know. It all depends on the program and the website and the coding, because they're all quite different. Some are very, very bad at what they do, and others are specific, like you say, Timo, at doing a particular task or job, which can really help you.
Well,
and others like ChatGPT or whatever, they can do almost anything, but it's AI still, and we are at this interesting precipice, aren't we?
I think that
go back to your piece of writing. You know, we're talking about that phrase, the forgotten tongue. You know, has that been used somewhere else? Has it read that phrase somewhere? This is what you can't be sure of.
So the argument again, isn't it, that it's picking, I mean, obviously, Simon, it's more important for you actually with your art, but it's picking bits out from existing pieces of information out there on the superhighway. So it's not, none of this is original. It's not coming from the AI's heart and empathy. It's picking stuff, and then it's a very complex language which it brings it together, and it creates something like we would write or what we would do. But is it choosing particular lines from other novels? And there is actually an AI plagiarism. I think Grammarly has got one where it can pick up on plagiarism. So how it does that as well. So it's fighting against itself in some respects. You recreate something, you go, yeah, that's great. Okay, let's get AI just to check the AI. And then it's like, well, actually, no, you can't use this line because it's straight from Wiki. And you think, can't do that.
But the idea of taking even a short phrase like, say, forgotten tongue is a line from a book somewhere. I'm now just suddenly thinking of somebody like Peter Blake, who made his name from doing collage. So he famously did Sgt. Pepper's cover. So he would take bits of Renaissance art, photographs taken by other people, and put them together in a unique way. So still borrowing chunks of other people's art, but then putting them together in a way that was new. And we have no trouble calling that art, and we have no trouble calling that original art. Is that any different to what ChatGPT or these other programs might be doing?
Collage is the exact right reference to bring up, isn't it, here, about using, and any work that's built from found objects or found sounds, everything from music concretes that change the way we think about music. The implication here, though, is that, I mean, when I think of a friend of mine doing a design fiction exercise, and it's all about the exercise and working out a series of prompts for your brain on paper to think of an object that you could design that will come from a future society, and that when you fashion it into the physical world as a prop will then trigger your brain to think about all the implications of that society from a physical experience. And what they did on this recording of their chat was they did all that themselves, went through the whole thought experiment, and then said, what if we put the same prompts into ChatGPT? Will it give us things we hadn't thought of? And that seems to me like a very practical way to use it. But the implication behind everything you've said and I've just said is we're already creative practitioners. So we know how to think creatively and can in the right mood grab this as another opportunity to see things differently, another way to lever our brains, because we're already on a creative track. Is that true? And if so, is this where it gets scary, because most people aren't taught how to be creative?
Yeah, I mean, we are creatives in an interesting time, and I think if you look back in the Victorian age, it was a very similar thing. We had people doing, they were creating their own things from art and even kind of copper-based art, just banging stuff out, whatever. And then the Industrial Revolution came. So artists did this Luddite thing and basically said, we're going to have this new movement. It's called the Arts and Crafts movement, late Victorian age, where they all went back to creating things, just normal things for the kitchen and all that, but just making it beautiful, hammering out kind of like copper flowers into things or whatever by hand. So it's all by hand, all by human hand. So there was this movement, and that movement was so important because it showed the value of art. And actually, when you kind of look back now, I suppose those implements are very collectible, very worth lots of money, and it's the same at the moment. So if we're going through this strange evolutionist process right now, where creators are getting really worried about their art, as long as we don't make it mediocre, which is what factories were doing, they were just running stuff out, and that's what AI could possibly be doing, just running mediocre stuff out. As long as we are creative punks and just go out and do something different and just, crack the system a little bit and go, well, yeah, that is good, But what you want is human-made pottery or human-made stories, and we'll be stamping it on there soon, human-made, to show its authenticity, that, you know, we've created it with flesh and blood and brain and pain and empathy and, you know, whatever.
Beautiful. And where's the mass market for the extra expensive quality human-made stuff? What happened to the arts and crafts movement?
It's not a mass market, and that's the problem, isn't it? It's not.
It can never be.
No, it became a sideline. So when we do our arts and crafts, when people go painting, or everything's very expensive. So if you do a painting, you go, well, I'm going to make it worth it because I made it. It's hours. You know, Simon, you know, you're going to put 300 quid on it or whatever. But that's not for your mass market. If you want to buy that picture, you get a print of it done by a machine for 50p in, you know, some cheap shop somewhere. So this isn't going away, and it's getting better. So I think we have to work. What do you think? I don't know, Simon. How do you feel about the art thing?
As an artist, none of this is new, in as much as for years now, particularly with the internet and the way things are going, and particularly with websites that sell T-shirts with anything you like plastered on it onto a mug or a key ring or anything like that, it's going to come a point where somebody decides, oh, well, I don't see any reason why I shouldn't just take that person's artwork and make some money myself from it. So that's been going on. So that kind of, you know, plagiarism side of things. But stepping back from that, what's interesting about this whole situation is it is making us question and asking that question: what is it about art that makes it so vital to human beings, and creativity? And you go back and you say, well, actually, it's that old chestnut, that old cheesy chestnut of cheesy chestnuts. That doesn't sound right.
Prompt that. Put it in a prompt.
It's not about getting to the tongues, is it?
I mentioned the mountain when I was saying about writing a book. It's not about getting to the top. It's about the journey upwards. And the thing that's missing with somebody just copying something and putting it out there and suddenly saying, oh, I'm an artist now. Because that's what's happening with AI art, is that people who are essentially prompters are using the AI to create art and then saying, oh, I'm an artist now. Well, that's a very broad term, artist. Are they artists? I guess they are, because, you know, is it such a broad term that they are a form of artist? But they haven't done that journey. They've just put the thing in. I did an experiment. So again, with another book I was working on, basically putting up in a basic prompt of the character and the situation they would be in. And I think, Andy, I showed you some of these images that were created by the AI art. And, you know, because I thought about doing a few pieces of art just to try and inspire myself, these pieces came through so beautifully and so refined that I thought, well, I don't need to do that anymore. But it shows, what it did do is it showed that the premise worked, because it was immediately evocative. And I thought, well, that, I don't know why I ever doubted myself. That was a really amazing premise.
What was the feeling you went away with, though? Was the feeling of, I've been vindicated by the idea, but now I couldn't do it that well? What was your?
That's exactly how I felt. I did feel like, you know, because we give ourselves a hard time as artists. We are, you know, we inadvertently become perfectionists, which isn't a great idea. The whole idea is to make mistakes and take us down avenues that we wouldn't ordinarily do.
Yeah.
So it really is making me, and it should make us question, you know, the whole idea of that, again, that other chestnut of what it is to be human, you know, about the way that we discover things, that it isn't healthy. The thing is, I don't like to say a definite yes or no on these things, because I, like you were inferring, Timo, is that I don't want to look at AI and say, isn't this an evil thing? But it is essentially a mirror to us.
It's a mirror.
That what we put into it is what we get out of it.
And you can tell after a while, especially with art, because I've been playing with it for years now, with DALL-E and Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, all these ones. They are immense. They are incredible. And if you pay more, obviously you're going to get even better quality, but because the algorithm will play better for you. But I still walk away from every image I've created or every image I've seen knowing it's AI. And in fact, people are putting so much up on Facebook now, and there are people getting fooled. My mum gets fooled, bless you, mum, and lots of others. They get fooled by putting things up and go, oh, isn't this a lovely owl? You think no, and if an owl was that colourful, would be eaten 3 seconds flat. They're normally grey and boring. So it looks beautiful, and it is a beautiful piece of digitally rendered art, but it's not real, and that's what's being kind of used. It's like, oh, this is. You can tell after a while. You just know it's the uncanny valley, Simon, that you always talk about, and you just have a feeling. You think, no, I know this isn't real, but there will come a time when we probably won't be able to tell the brushstrokes from the digital stroke.
It starts building in almost like flaws in it. Because they're the bits that you pick up on. It's like when you look at the human face, we recognize each other because of the flaws. I don't know if you've seen some of these videos people put together where they morph somebody's face and using the stereotypically so-called perfect proportioned face, and they adjust a person's face like a celebrity to give them a perfect face. And then suddenly it's kind of sterile, you're not getting that same thing, and
but then
those things.
But then AI as a tool, because it's been shaped by people, but also some programs are self-learning as well, will know that an ideal face, an attractive face, is asymmetrical, has flaws, will be more attractive because of those little imperfections, and will put them in order to make the face and the image more pleasing. We're at that stage where AI is a tool guided by humans, but sometimes, if it's sophisticated enough, with self-learning programs to iterate itself and become more than it started out as. And there will come a time when AI art or AI writing does become indistinguishable. So this piece that you read out earlier on, Lee, will have proper structure and character, and nothing will feel out of place, and it will build like a classic story would normally build and have a wonderful denouement. And then where will we be if it's indistinguishable? I mean, Clark once said, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Any sufficiently sophisticated piece of AI creativity could be indistinguishable from human-made art, and then we have to start talking about value. The value of things. Are we valuing something just because it was made by a human, but the AI arts can do exactly the same?
Well, the question:
then where does value come into it?
That's a good word, value, and in the light of that, and actually what we've all been saying in the last few minutes, the question is emotional connection. What is the emotional connection to these things? And first pass, you could say, well, there won't be one, and so the value is very low because it's meaningless. It's wallpaper. But actually, if you get caught in a moment along the lines of this trashy novel or this trashy bit of TV, I needed it. We're designed to glom onto things like utter morons, and we could receive a piece of AI work and just be in tears because it's found us in just the right moment. So we're the people putting the emotional truth on anything. Therefore, the value of the AI art could be much higher in a particular moment, and we'll just say what we've been saying for years about all kinds of tats. I go, I know it's a bit shit, but I adore this. Right?
That's a really good point, isn't it? If you think about films, Andy, right? So blockbuster films. I've seen a lot of blockbusters recently. They're very empty. They're fun. They're popcorn filling. It's great to just leave your brain at the door and then come away. And then I'll go and watch something like Anatomy of a Fall, and that I can't imagine being written by AI, but I could imagine all of the Jason Statham Meg films and Godzilla and Kong and all that could be written by AI, because to be honest,
they basically were, I think.
it's formula, right? And that's the thing. It'd be
So I was just going to say, but the thing is, they are all made by human beings. Those blockbuster films that are vacuous and are like fast food that don't really fill you up.
Which is where the
They're
AI
made by
would work
they're
with
made
it.
by flesh and blood people.
Yeah.
Talking
But
of
still-
flesh
but
and blood,
still-
AI doesn't need to go to the loo, but I do.
Oh, okay, right. Well,
That will change soon.
yeah.
No, but it's when I was watching the Godzilla film the other day, yes, a lot of it's made with AI. So there's a lot of animators and things that are starting to lose out a bit because they would have spent years doing this in a cell somewhere in a bedroom, but they're not doing it so much. All they're using as tools, and it's quicker. So it's quicker. You can get these things out much quicker. I don't know whether the value is any less than it already is because it's quite vacuous stuff. Anyway, it's been pumped out. But if you have your first AI film, which is coming, it'll happen, won't it? I don't think that anybody's going to. That's going to be like the first talkie. You're all going to be going, "Oh, this is weird." And then 10 years time, it doesn't matter. Somebody at the end will just put AI assisted film using this, and this. Director Andy Robinson, writer. Everything else is AI. So basically, it's just directed by Andy Robinson. Prompt by Andy Robinson.
Prompted,
filmed by
gosh,
AI.
yes.
But you won't know the difference because it's just like Statham running through the jungle, shooting up a human fish or something, whatever you want to put in there. Hang on, I better write that down. But
Human fish.
Well, this is where we're at. I mean, often you'll hear in the film industry, you'll hear people say, "Oh, this film was clearly written by a committee," or so they're already saying there's no soul to this particular piece of entertainment. It was formulaic is another word that they'll use, and obviously AI is built on formulas and algorithms. So we're already leveling these criticisms of art that are made by humans. So if an AI could come up with a Jason Statham type film that was just as good or perhaps a little bit better, where would we be in terms of criticizing? At the end of the day, art is really about how it's received. It's about the receiving end of something. One day somebody will make a beautiful moving piece of work, whether it's the moving image or written via AI, where there are very few, if any, fingerprints on it, and people will be moved and people will cry. And then how are they supposed to feel? Will they feel cheated in some way that they were moved by something that wasn't made by a human being? Should they feel cheated?
But then the question is whether it was or wasn't made by a human being, because if it is still produced by prompts, then of course it's made by a human being. It's along the lines of the Amazon having to fire its sort of rescind its idea to have a totally automated shop, because actually it wasn't automated at all. This is the myth. No, actually it was just loads of people miles away, hand checking everything. So there's a lot of Wizard of Oz going on here anyway. There's a lot of BS and theatre to sell tech, but if it's still being prompted, then it's human made. It's a human instigation, right?
It is, because the prompt is, but the like we are saying now, it doesn't have an originality to it.
Yeah,
it will just look at human history and human evolution, human information, and it will bring it all together and it will create something. So if it's programmed to create an empathic film, it will do it. And if you put in there, I don't know, Nazis, Jews, Hitler's last days, whatever, if you put all that in, all concentration camps, it might come out with the next zone of interest. But the chances at the moment are pretty slim. So until that happens, it might be another 5-10 years, which isn't long anyway, where it produces proper artistic films, but it's still pulling on human endeavor and human. So yes, it's plagiarizing, but don't we all do that anyway as humans? In order to move on, we have to look at the parts. We can't just create something brand new from our brain. It doesn't work like that. So we evolve the same. AI has evolved really super quick, but that's basically the same as humans, right? With our artistic endeavors, we just borrow and we enhance or change.
Well, there's an interesting debate there about that exact point versus when we do something genuinely new. So being our age as Gen Xers, we were at the end of actually new sounds. For example, thinking of music, new sounds being heard in the world for the first time ever in the 1960s and 70s and up into the 80s. Music technology created sounds in everyday pop that we'd never heard before. The synthesizer didn't exist. We hadn't heard filter sweeps. We hadn't heard oscillators doing that clangy thing. We hadn't then heard how samplers rearrange the sound you already hear, or music concrete using tape. These are genuinely new things fashioned by curious humans. So when you're talking about, well, you know, it'll all just seem like fast food, or those complaints that we're very used to, that was leveled at people using keyboards and synths in the early 1980s. The British music press bloody hated electro pop and synth pop.
Plinky punky music.
Yeah, right. And it's all made by computers now. They said that then. Goodness, when MIDI came along, and oh my goodness, and it really is just made by computers. And we all laugh because we know actually it was a genuinely new music sound made with soul. And that whole sort of robot meeting human thing that Kraftwerk embodies is utterly beautiful and makes some of the best tunes ever. Whereas what we're talking about here, an AI, a large language model, is only the sum total of references and old things. So is there any place for something that's purely a language generated series of ones and zeros bouncing off each other? Is there any place for emergence? Can something genuinely new emerge? That's probably a question sitting underneath this. I don't know what the answer is.
Even with Kraftwerk, if you look at the arpeggio and all the synthesizers they used, they obviously came from oscilloscopes and electronics and theremin. It was found that you could create notes using these weird sounds, electronic sounds, but they still go with a pattern. They still have a 4/4. They still use blues riffs or whatever. It's still the musicality. The sounds might be different, but the musicality is still pretty much borrowed. And that's the same with the AI, isn't it? I mean, the coding and everything is done by humans. It's new. It's a new thing that it's doing what it's doing, but essentially it's still picking up everything that's already been done. So we may have discovered the sounds. You might discover that you can stand on a pylon and put your hand on it and bang it when it creates a brand new sound. It wouldn't last long, but once you've got that sound, what are you going to do with it? Apart from a bit of ambient thwanging, you're going to turn it into a song, which is again a formula that we've been using for centuries.
I mean, there's another avenue we can go down, and this is just detracting us. It's me going worry over there. But even with music, when you break it down, the maths in there is just so beautiful. Just the fact that if you take a sample, if you take a note of the note C and you speed it up to twice the frequency, you get the same note.
Yeah.
I mean, that's maths. Times the frequency by 2 and you get the same note 1 octave above. And that's
that's why I was confused about singing what.
Oh, right.
No, twice.
but when you break it down, everything does come down to maths.
And that's a way of framing and understanding it, but it's not just maths. That's the human reality, that we can break it down and want to be logical. We want, as curious animals, we want to know why and how, and it's frequencies, it's vibrations. Then you find there's patterns in the universe, and our brains are seeing there are patterns, and it looks really meaningful, and we infer all this meaning out of it. But actually, what we then generate is soul. That's not just maths.
It's unquantifiable.
I mean, maybe the artistic impulse at the end of the day, coming through humans, it's just a form of filtering. I mean, with the English language, it's 26 letters, and everything written only has access to those same, or everything written in English only has access to those same letters. If we're talking about vocabulary, it might be, 15,000-20,000 words. I mean, most people probably get through life not needing more than somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 words day to day.
10.
Well, yeah. Yeah. So we're all juggling these basic units, and from those 26 letters, from those 10 to 15,000 words, you've got the works of Shakespeare, you've got the Bible, you've got everything in between, every great pop song ever written. So there is no new thing under the sun. We have to understand this. Last few weeks, I've been kind of doing an impromptu kind of watch party with our mutual friend Robin Wenery, the cinematographer, and so we've been working our way through Hitchcock films. So we've done Strangers on a Train, Rear Window, and last Friday we watched it was The 39 Steps, which is possibly one of Hitchcock's finest films from his British period. It's probably my favourite Hitchcock film. And we watch it separately, but at the same time in the evening, and then we just kind of message each other and talk about our thoughts about the film, and it just kind of generates conversations about other filmmakers or other Hitchcock films. And right at the very end, podcast, it is another podcast. And right at the end of the 39 Steps, there's a scene where Richard Hannay and the woman who he's been sort of handcuffed to for all the adventures during the film come together at the end at the music hall, and Mr. Memory's kind of on the ground. I'm sorry, I'm giving away the ending, which I never do, but the two characters in the final shot just kind of come together, and it's quite a tight shot. You just, as they get up, you just see their hands, and their hands just reach out for each other, and it's a beautiful ending to the film, particularly in the context of everything you see beforehand. And I just, as we were chatting afterwards, I just suddenly realized, oh my God, I've used that exact same shot of a man and woman just reaching out and holding hands in one of my films, Keepsake. And I hadn't realized it clearly was a subconscious influence that just lodged in my head, and I just used it. I plucked it out. No one ever gives you grief for something like that. That's inspiration. That's homage, or whatever you want to call it. I mean, if you're literally ripping off every shot, then it's plagiarism. But I'm influenced by the films that I see. I'm influenced by the moments that I see out in the world. I'm a collector. My mix might be original, the things that I just kind of lump together and craft to create a story. The mix might be original, but the elements, I'll be kidding myself if I think that the building blocks are anything other than, recycled or used in other contexts, and we're absolutely fine about that.
It's the zeitgeist, it's the cultural context we're in. We're just picking stuff up. In that sense, it's the same principle as a large language model. It's being fed a load of stuff. But I wonder, therefore, whether we will see a trend to break outside that model, because we're all working in a Europeanized world where the frame of reference has not just been Europeanized, the white kind of particular economic structure, as I often talk about, of the world, but it's become Anglified with English as a language dominating the way we think and the way all the tech bros have thought to make these large language models. So we're feeding it a very, very particular view of the world, is the big headline, obvious complaint. How is that going to translate over into, or are we all going to go looking for language models that are, what's an LLM going to be like in Arabic, in even international Mandarin, with the rise of the influence of China as an economic thing? Is it still just going to sound like us because international China is copying so much of the West? There's a whole kind of, how are we going to want to break out in the next
That would be an interesting thing, whether
outside that reference.
AI creates, or we create, some kind of a universal language that we might all end up speaking or hearing. Because if you think that, some cultures have 50 words for snow, different types of snow. No, I think it is, isn't it?
Is it? I don't know.
I think they're all read by Stephen Fry on Kate Bush's album. Might be made up, but it's the kind of, or Sweden and things like that. They'll say higi or whatever. They'll have a word to describe a feeling that we don't have. If we're going to describe that feeling, it's about 6 words. In German, it's about 20. But it's like you do have these. Mandarin, like you say, that's got 26 20 alphabets or something, across the regions. So they mean different things. The colloquialisms are very important. So AI is at such a basic level, especially as far as English is concerned. It'd be interesting to see how that works with other languages, or whether or not eventually it might pull other languages' colloquialisms together, and we end up using a brand new Esperanto, kind of an AI version.
Going back to music, it's like I was saying about the scales, one note and then another. And, as you say, we as Europeans are so used to using this particular scale of music. But there are other scales from all over the world where there are notes that fall between the notes, and we never hear that. We don't. Our ears aren't trained to hear those.
No.
Yeah.
Have you seen Monkey Man? Just very quickly, Monkey Man. Okay, Dev Patel, and it's basically a bit of a John Wick Indian version. But they have a tabula. Is it tabula? That
Tabula,
one. Yeah. And I have friends who play it. I kind of understand it. I've heard it, but this showed a little a way of communicating in a way that I didn't realize. And like you say, Simon, that sort of thing is quite difficult to, I think, emulate, because the way you hit some board, and it all means something slightly different. It can be characters, it can be a feeling, it can be it's just a very clever few moments in a film where the guy's telling a story with it, and I thought, that's a really interesting piece of music. It's an interesting storytelling aspect. It's very colloquial to the region. Is AI ever going to be picking up on these very, very subtle nuances of other people's languages and cultures?
Well, arguably, it has the capacity to. But if it's working at the speed that it's at and learning things and coding things in seconds that would take us a long time, then mathematically it could go deep and exponentially learn. And that's the computer promise, isn't it? It will emergence simply like all life. It's just an emergence of enough time and enough data fiddling about, and something new then comes out, and you've got a mutation. So in theory, yes, it could do that, but at the moment, we ourselves can't keep up with that. Our digital audio workstations are coded to the scale that we know, and trying to keep up and code that down so that we can work with it is very. It's beyond us. So it could do in theory. It makes me think of the issue of recording nature and how we're beginning to think about nature's place as a creator, which is sort of notionally a bit silly. Is nature an artist? Well, let's talk about what art really is. But also it does bring up the moral reality of, we keep taking things from nature. What if we, quite cutely, as the initiative has with, is it Earth Percent, trying to put nature sounds on Spotify and generate money from the playlist back to help nature funds. It's sort of cute, but also it does provoke thought. But then what happens when you've recorded a piece of nature? If you've captured it, is it still alive? Is it still nature? You're the person who captured it and made the editorial choice to grab that bit, but it's all the animals in that recorded slice of 2 minutes. Is that the artist? Are you the artist? How are we paying respect to that moment?
Is it dead? Royalties?
How would you divvy the royalties up between worms and birds?
Yeah.
It's a minefield.
I don't think the PRS is set up for that yet.
It's not really set up for that, mate. No.
They can't sign the papers. Simple as that. Can I just focus? We've been talking. Me and Simon have talked about kind of art and writing, and we've still got kind of film and music left from the other two corners of this. I'm really interested, Andy. Actually, you showed us a film of, I think, a girl walking down the street, and it was a fully AI generated thing, and it wasn't. We could tell it was AI generated. It wasn't perfect, but it was. No. It was damn near getting close. So, how do you feel about that as an oncoming storm of?
Very much in two minds, really. So yes, that piece was from AI Sora's website, the woman walking down a sort of a rain-soaked street in Japan or somewhere like that. And yeah, there were initially a little bit like the first paragraph on your story. You're hit by that sort of wow factor of, oh, this is pretty bloody incredible. And then as your ride just kind of locks in, there are things about the gait and the weight and the movement that just don't feel quite right, because as human beings we spent millennia looking at other people, and we can just tell instantly if an inflection is right or a movement, and so it's not there yet. But as I said earlier on in our threads, this particular type of software, excuse me, didn't exist a year ago, 6 months ago, and so where is it going to be in a year's time? So it's not perfect as a tool for filmmakers. Potentially, it could put certain groups of people out of work. So people involved in pre-visualization for sort of Hollywood movies, where their job is basically to do a kind of a animatic or a moving storyboard of a sequence, particularly with things that involve action and stuff like that. They would be using tablets. They would maybe be videoing things, compiling a moving storyboard for the director to kind of respond to. Potentially something like AI Sora could be doing that work much more quickly. But the problem is, at the moment, there probably isn't the specificity or the granularity that a director would want. So the director would say, for that scene that you mentioned earlier on, well, I want the woman to be blonde. She needs to be wearing a long leather coat instead of a jacket. She needs to be 2 feet to the left. We need vintage 50s cars on the right hand side coming down the street. That's what directors do. They want to be very, very specific. Whether the software is there at the moment to in the prompts to be that specific, I don't know. I suspect it will be, because all you're doing is giving a typewritten description. But at the moment, all AI Sora is doing is just serving up what it believes your description has asked for, and that's not specific enough for a filmmaker.
It's a massive interpretation. There's all this gap of, well, I'll do this, and then something magic happens in the black box, and it goes, oh, well, maybe it's making all these random decisions, right?
Yeah, so it's not really a tool in the precise sense that a filmmaker would want, because they would want to either respond to what's served up and make changes, which I'm sure it will be able to do eventually, or just to be able to tweak in a very granular way. These are things that I have no reason won't be able to be done with enough time and computing power and all of that. So then the question then becomes, would I use it as a tool? I think for someone with no resources and no means to make a film, say you couldn't go to the desert, say you couldn't find a rain-soaked street that looks like Japan easily because you live on the other side of the world, why wouldn't you use this as a tool? It could be a very, very powerful tool to create something when before you couldn't create anything.
Yeah.
So I can imagine it being very. I'm tempted myself.
Yeah, there's a lot there that it could fill in gaps for those of us with no budget. But if we use it intentionally, there is a way to get something that you couldn't otherwise. And the happy accidents are part of the joy of working with tech in a creative way, right? This little thing you will have seen on my LinkedIn is an example of, I think, sort of positive and helpful. It was
right.
Come on. Oh,
yeah, we saw it. There we go.
That thing. Right. So obviously that's actually me in front of a green screen, and I've dicked about in Photoshop. But the two images behind, the kind of the good future, bad future, that's good enough. That's given me something that is human made and communicates the thing I was trying to about. Do you flick between a hopeful future and a bad one as a change maker? But AI absolutely helped that happen, right? Those sorts of things are really useful to be able to do.
Can I criticize that?
Yeah.
Your face should be looking to the future, not to the past. Just saying.
Yeah, well,
maybe that
was just my good side.
These places where we are at the moment.
It's your good side. Yeah. AI can sort that out. So those two images were prompts, were they?
They were just prompts.
Yeah,
but because they're in the background, they just create a kind of, an effect that I want, and that's where good enough is good enough.
And we know that it is. We know that that's not human made.
Exactly.
Human made. So that's fine. It's good enough, like you say. with the whole filming thing. The backgrounds, yes, you could program the backgrounds to be AI. That, like we have little people fighting in films, they're all AI now. In the background, you can have, but you can have all of the stuff going on, like the 50s cars. You can program somebody having a fight in the corner of the window. Somebody having, so you could have a complete bar scene. There could be a bar fight behind you. But getting that main character down, that will happen. But what you lose, as we know, is the human interaction, the bloopers, the things that go wrong, and the things that come out from going wrong that become
Talking
right.
about human interaction there. Just what timing
wow.
is that? Thank you, lovely First Lady of Momo.
Oh,
That's amazing. Exactly what I need. So yes, no, robots definitely. Until we can get a robot who can do that,
Yeah.
it's a pass from me.
Yeah, your wife is safe for now, I think, Timo. For now.
But I've had to do an awful lot of prompting to convince Caroline that I'm worth investing in her time. It's taken a lifetime of relationship to the learning models with each other to go. Yes, I do want to just bring you a cup of coffee. Do
you think the prompts are silent now? Did you just do a look?
We can, yeah.
Sometimes he gets a look.
No, I tried to preempt the look by getting there ahead of it. That's called being a team.
Timo, you're a musician, and I've been listening to, or I tried playing with some AI music creating machines. They're not amazing at the moment, and I think that's crawling up slowly. But what people are probably going to be using them for, like Andy, will be to use as trailer music or to have in the background. If it's ambient enough, if it's just a few chords with a few strings and it's good enough, again, as we say, that may be enough to create and use in a film. But where does that put you as a soundtrack artist?
Well, where does that put, what I've just done there with visual language, where I'm used to going to photography sites, I can now go into that and get what I need. And honestly, I haven't got enough money to not. So other artists are going to do the same thing. If you're a filmmaker, you're going to go, well, unless I've got a mate I really want to work with, actually just to knock it together, this will do, right? So in that sense, it will. There's work that we won't be getting that we might have done before, but it also, somewhere else, it democratizes it. So on the one hand, it's the exploitation, yes, but I'm an artist taking somebody else's job because I've got to try and get something out and I couldn't afford to. So if it's fair for me, then it's fair for somebody else to do that instead of hiring me until the time is right to hire me.
So are we kind of happy with the fact that we could be seen as being hypocrites in a way, but we're not, are we? I think it's kind of like a hand in hand. It's working as a tool, as Andy said. So if somebody was going to pay you £200 to do a very short clip for something, music-wise, you would put your heart and soul into it. You'd probably spend a week in the shed, come out with some brilliant, absolute genius that no AI could possibly come out with, and it's got this Timo quality to it. Whereas you could turn and go, right, that's a week off, 200 quid in the bank. But I mean, would it be, would you feel that that's the right thing to do? Or
it's for the director to decide what's right for them. If what you get out, it's like Kubrick using Also Sprach Zarathustra for 2001. It was a temp track, famously. There's a whole score.
Yeah.
But he got so used to hearing the temp track that was royalty free because it was by Strauss, he kept it in and it became iconic. So it was the right editorial decision. Yeah. We all know, I'm sure, trawling through libraries, stock libraries, it kills the soul like any other trawling through the internet. And so there'll be directors who just go, I can't find what I want. And that's when you need to knock on the door of a composer whose style you like and say, can we work together? I can prompt you by buying you a beer, and I can prompt you by sitting on your shoulder a little bit, and we'll work out a relationship where how much I sit on your shoulder and prompt you. Go, put that there, put that there. Relationship is really the issue here rather than prompt. Because
can I just say we don't work for beer, okay? We work for money, everybody.
Thank you for that note.
Please pay your artists.
I am prepared to work for croissants.
I would, but to be fair, I would too.
But this does bring up a really important idea. So, a film maker working with a composer. So we've been on that journey, Timo, a few times now,
Wonderful.
and
Right.
it's the most important part. It really is, as Simon said earlier on, it really is the journey, not the destination, because it brings value. So something that I watched the other day that I think, Simon, you've seen and recommended to us, which was the documentary Squaring the Circle, which was the hypnosis documentary. And for those of you who haven't seen it, it's basically about these two guys. Forgot their names now. One was Storm, one was Poe, or something like that. Really odd names. But anyway, they'd met in Cambridge back in the mid-60s. They just happened to be sharing a place with the guys who ended up forming Pink Floyd. And one of them was had got a place at Royal College of Art and dragged his friend along and said, look, you can, just come along and enroll. You can do photography and stuff like that. And because they knew the members of Pink Floyd, and Pink Floyd, once they started, needed an album cover and some photography, they basically accidentally stumbled into making art for album covers. And the documentary just has this wonderful journey of these two guys, and they brought other people in later on. They were doing covers for they did Dark Side of the Moon, they did all of the iconic covers for Peter Gabriel and Paul McCartney when he was with Wings. So many iconic covers. But the thing that I took away from it, I watched it a couple of nights ago, was with every cover that they did and with every image that they came up with, there was a story, which obviously made for really good documentary. So, I mean, and this is really pertinent because this was pre-Photoshop. So everything that happened in a photograph or an image that they created happened for real. So one of their early ones was for a band called Elegy. I'd never heard of it, but anyway, the image was sand dunes, ripples on sand dunes in the desert, and then these series of huge red inflatable balls just dotted and going off into the distance. Now it'd be like 5 minutes in Photoshop or a prompt in AI. Back then it was like, well, we didn't know any other deserts other than the Sahara, so we had to book a flight to the Sahara, and I had to figure out how I could get 60 inflatable balls deflated so we could fit them in our luggage so that we could inflate them when we got to the Sahara. So they made this image for real. The other classic one is Wish You Were Here, with the guy who's on fire shaking hands with the other guy in front of these Hollywood studios. It's for real. And they found someone mad enough to put on the prosthetic fireproof makeup and set himself alight with guys with fire extinguishers just out of the frame. He did it 15 times. Initially they couldn't find any stuntmen to do it. It said most of the stuntmen at the time were saying, hell, I'm doing the Towering Inferno, I can set myself alight all week and get paid millions of dollars. Why would I want to be on the album cover? And they found this one guy who said yes, he would do it. And he said afterwards, he said, all of those other films I did where I did all those stunts, nobody remembers them. I was the guy on the cover of the Pink Floyd album. Everyone remembers me for that. Yeah. So there's a story. There's a story woven intrinsic. And, I think we all agree the basic building blocks of people's lives are really stories. What's your story? How did you get it? What's your journey? And that's the one thing that AI art, however good it is on the surface, will never have. It will never have that story. The efforts and the journey that was required to make something manifest. It'll never have that story. You won't make it was Anton Corbijn that made this documentary Squaring the Circle. He's not going to make 10 years from now, he's not going to make a documentary about people who put prompts into a computer but came up with incredible pieces of work, because there's no story there. There's nobody taking a statue as was on and getting into a helicopter and going to the top of the Alps, plonking this statue on, I don't know, Mont Blanc or whatever it was, for a Wings album, because they had to do it for real. Paul McCartney just tossed off the idea of, oh, let's have this statue on top of Everest, and then these guys had to kind of go off and, you know, make it happen. And he does say in the documentary, oh, wouldn't it have been easy if you'd done this in the studio, just got a ton of salt, just plunk the statue on the bottom? Yeah,
but see, there's an economic implication there, that the difference between emotional truth in storytelling and content, which is gutless. It can go through all the motions of structuring a story, the arcs, the strong start, strong finish, themes. It can analyze all that. It hasn't got a why for doing it, but the money that was there to have Paul McCartney fly a Wings statue up Mont Blanc or wherever it was, is because that was the conduit that would get a lot more money back, because there wasn't an internet, because there was fandom set up in the particular way that it was in the analog world. So that's why the money was there. The economic system we're after is just wants to produce tons and tons of content to keep that general machine going that we all slosh about in and does our brains in, very marinate us. And punctuating that will come the kind of voices of us through the middle of it. And that's where the emotional truth is. We have a very different context in that sense, that we don't just get these things handed down from gods every couple of years where we hold the vinyl. There's a sea of stuff. So actually getting ourselves heard is now a very different challenge, but it comes down to the same storytelling imperative of having our voices heard with authenticity. I've been at Bournemouth Writing Festival. It's all about that for authors.
It's interesting because that piece of footage that you showed us, Andy, of the girl walking down the street, these things work really well in isolation. So for advertising and things like that, very short form, I think, works really. It's there. It just does. They can just keep putting in prompts until they get what they want. But then you look at the bigger picture and you think of things like world building. This is the thing: is that the AI is having, or as much as an absolute, it's got an absolute free reign of going to the internet and picking up every piece of information. It's not necessarily picking up the nuances that we do as human beings. There's stuff we've absorbed right through our lives, which is affecting the work we do now. And AI, ultimately it will pick up on these things, but whether it will have the emotional connections that we make in quite the same organic connections, because I'm thinking about a film like Lord of the Rings, where they built the whole village and they built the whole house. Bilbo's house was just full of stuff. Every little corner had detail in it, because it was all about, and none of that appeared on screen. But as far as the actors were concerned, they were completely immersed, because they knew Peter Jackson's a clever enough filmmaker that he understands that human beings will absorb everything about them and will give a certain performance dependent upon their belief of the world that they're existing in.
Belief, there you go, exactly. That's the emotional connection, and we're now talking about it. We're talking about those artifacts even though we haven't seen them. That's the integrity. That's the belief we have in the integrity from the word truth. Yes.
Integrity is a very important word, isn't it, here? So when you look at those album covers, I didn't know the story behind the Fireman, and I didn't know the story behind the Wings cover. But when you finally find out about them, you think, oh my God, these guys are so cool. They didn't bang on about it. They just did it, and it looks great. And then they left it 50 years for people to discover that they flew it up to the top of the Andes. How cool is that? They're not banging on about it. It's just art. It's done. And if they are questioned or asked, then they would say, yeah, sure. This is the story behind it. Like you say, Andy, it's all got a story. You won't have that with album covers of the future if they're just generated by AI.
No.
You won't have that art.
I mean, the value that gives is the thing, and again, it comes back to this idea of art. I mean, why do we pay $15 million for a Picasso? It's not about ability. I mean, there's that classic, I don't know if it's apocryphal or not, of Picasso was in a restaurant, and a fellow diner wanted him to just sketch something on a napkin, so they could say they had a Picasso. So he does something and he hands over the napkin and says, "Yeah, that'll be $10,000, please." And the diner's incensed. You've just sketched on a napkin, $10,000. You're not. And Picasso says, "You're not paying for the sketch. You're paying for the 40 years that it took for me to get to this point and this sketch." And that's what's intrinsically enfolded in to human art. It is the journey. It is the flying up to the Alps. It is coming up with concepts and the effort. I think I posted it on our sort of private thread, and there was this piece which I really recommend people seek out. It's on YouTube, and basically it's one of those letters live things where Stephen Fry and other personalities read out letters. And this particular one was a letter written by Nick Cave in response to kids who were asking about his thoughts on AI in art and creativity. And I'll just kind of summarize it. It's a beautiful letter, but he starts off basically with the biggest piece of art, the biggest piece of creativity. He basically talks about God, when God created the heavens and the earth, and it took him 6 days, and on the 7th day he rested. And Nick Cave basically says, I think the rest day is very insightful in this piece, because it means that creating the universe took effort, and even God needed to have a rest after doing what he did. And in the world of creativity, it's effort. It's the effort that you put in that is key to whatever you're doing. It's the struggle, basically. I think we've all of us have creatively struggled, either struggling to come up with an idea or wrestling with getting something finished. We've all been part of the struggle. Sometimes it's been easy and the pieces have fallen together. Other times it's been like it pulling teeth. But the effort is something that AI will never have to do. It generated that story that you wrote, that you read earlier on, in 2 seconds, you said. Not much effort really required there.
And it's also picking up on that nuance and the beauty in the certain flaws. I'm thinking about a few different things. Would AI have decided to score Star Wars with a classical soundtrack? Or would it have it would have just looked and referred to other previous science fiction? Yeah, it might have looked at 2001, but would it have scored 2001 with the classical score? It's things like that. Would it have left in the point where the stormtrooper banged his head? It wouldn't have done that. I'm thinking about, as a Pet Shop Boys fan, I'm thinking about the second Pet Shop Boys album, actually, where it's got Neil Tennant yawning on it. Yeah. Would they have picked out? They wouldn't have picked out that particular shot. That was a he's saying about stories with album covers. That was a photo session for Smash Hits. And he just kept the camera sort of going click, 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 click. And then Neil Tennant yawned because he was so bored. And then they picked out that one as being, because the photographer said, well, that is so you. That is so you. So, and they used it. Chris Lowe hates the album cover now. He thinks it's rubbish. But it's become iconic alongside all those other ones.
But that phrase there, sorry to interrupt, that phrase there, that's so you, shows that what that came out of is relationship. That the emotional truth of it was somebody went, this says all this because it's very you to do that. That's not a prompt, is it? That's a relationship.
Yeah. That's very human. But that's again, we've got to come back to this idea that the AI is an incredible tool, and it's an incredible thought tool. As I was saying earlier, that for those times when I can't orchestrate and I can't get clarity, the AI will give me clarity and will give me structure, because that's how it works. But in time, what I wanted to say about going back to music and getting Timo back onto his field is, this idea that we've been dealing with, you know, Spotify and online music and these algorithms that have been showing us, you know, these platforms will try and give us more of what we enjoy, but that's not necessarily what we need.
No.
Spotify will show you more and more of the same style of music that you're already listening to, and that doesn't allow us to grow. It just sends us down into a, you know, it's the Simon Cowell of AI, isn't it? Because it just sends us down and sells us more of what we already like.
Yes.
And where's the growth in that? Where's the enjoyment in that? Where's the point where you fall in love? You know, what if you're dating people? If you always date people with brown hair and, you know, brown eyes all the way through, you know, you're never going to meet the person that you're actually supposed to be with.
And that right there is an implication of a central device in creativity when you're doing it for a job. It's juxtaposition. It's putting two things together that you wouldn't have thought to.
No.
And what extra magic comes out of choosing to do that? It's such a get out of jail card when you've got problems to solve in any kind of problem solving, and definitely in creativity. So to do it with our lives is what nature intended. Nature's so rich because it's constantly giving random things, apparently random things, these kind of interactions and plays. And what that happens over millions of years is things emerge that simply didn't exist before. That really is a spirit of the mechanics of creativity. Only we get to bring our consciousness into it, and our imaginations and our soul and our emotional need to testify, and all those things in art that somebody should really write a book on about all the mechanisms that, I mean, I don't know where we could possibly find a book that could get published that explores, like, say, 9 practices of artists that help humans think straight. Like what you're talking about, Andy, just now. It's embodiment. That the miles, it's authenticity for us. We go, that's real. They earned it. And we need that validation in going, no, they really earned it. That's a truth thing. But what we're really saying is they learned by doing. And it's good because you put yourself physically, emotionally, temporally through that experience, and it grew you as it grew itself. That's part of the creativity of art. So what we're really talking about here is how to help create spaces for all humans to be creative, not just consume content.
Yes. That's nice.
Well, we really do need a book for that, don't we?
Probably do. This thing I'm flashing up on screen is a good sort of not quite closing, but dear viewer, if you're reading this, it's a thing that's been doing the rounds. I think we all found it in different places, about somebody describing how their company hired text promptless people to just not be creative anymore, but prompt an AI. And the journey they describe in that is how it sort of progressively gets worse because of the current interface. It's just text prompts. And as you said earlier, Andy, they can't actually take what they've done and go, oh, that's good. That's 90% already. Great. How can we just move that there and move that there? Currently, we can't. But the thinking of the prompters, coupled with the crapness of the interface, meant that the results that the creative director was getting back from these prompting people was progressively more and more bad because they didn't know how to frame it differently. They didn't know how to think creatively. And that is a paucity that will keep old things in play. Choosing the same brown-haired people, the same music constantly is the status quo we're in. But what AI could do with the right creative brains using it is change the world in any number of ways. It doesn't have to be an inevitable flow if our creative human brains are getting hold of it, right?
Just like any other tool.
You mentioned films, Andy. What films that we've enjoyed or have made us think about AI?
Robots.
Robots
Yes.
and all that. So did we all choose a film that we had an effect on us of some kind? Or was it just
I believe so. I think we did. Even though you've got a description up as Robbie the Robot, or Lee for short.
That's not mine, but anyway.
Oh, okay.
That's not my film. It's
That's not your film. Oh, okay.
Are you asking me first?
Yeah.
Get Lee out of the way. Ex Machina, Alex Garland's film. Now,
I don't have that here. Damn.
There are millions of films I love. I love all AI films, you know, Blade Runners and all that. I love all those. But I think what I enjoyed about this particular film It did remind me a little bit of my favourite story, The Machine Stops, which I'll always bang on about, and that does have AI in it. So that's an important one to read, folks. Short story, E.M. Forster, The Machine Stops.
The Machine Stops. Everyone read it.
It's about exactly what we're doing right now, right here. But Ex Machina's got that same thing where it's just a few characters in a home or research facility. It's an outsider, a billionaire coder and designer who's created an AI called Ava, and he wants to put the Turing test to it. The Turing test being that, if you sit in front of a machine and you can't tell it's a machine, then it's passed the test of being human in a way. And it is you're on the edge all the time because the whole film doesn't feel right. The character's a little bit off, and that's because there are a few twists and turns in it. But I think what's really important is the actual discussion between the young fella that comes in and Ava, and how things happen within the film and manipulation happens, and it becomes you've got to watch it at least 2 or 3 times when you're thinking, wait a minute, what? And you don't know whether somebody's a robot or they're not, or what is this film about? What's it trying to tell us? And simply what it's trying to say is, don't let the cat out of the bag too soon. You basically make sure 1000%, not that that's a thing, but 1000% that it's not going to actually destroy the world or harm the world or whatever. But it's curiosity. It's curiosity. A bit like Poor Things, where you've got curiosity in a child in an adult body, and there's a few things that aren't quite right about it. It doesn't have the empathy. It's missing the empathy that you think, that she thinks humans should, that she's trying to learn about. But everything else is there. Everything else is there. Cleverness, manipulation, flirtation. There's a lot of nakedness in the film, but actually that's quite important too, because it echoes humanity. It echoes what the multimillionaire is doing and why he's chosen women to make and not men, which is interesting because it's a man's world, right? Why wouldn't you make something beautiful? So it's a very interesting film with a very dark, unfortunately, it's quite dark ending, but I can't stop thinking about it. The first time I watched it, I couldn't stop thinking about it. And there's a particular scene which I may spoil it for you, but a knife goes into something, right? And it's the way the knife goes into something is really, really horrible and weird. And it's the blank face of a robot doing it, and you think, oh, yeah. So it's very, very. And there's a curiosity and all this sort of thing. So it's learning. It's a learning thing. I mean, this is AI within a robot that's going to be put into, what's it going to be used for? But there's a lot of question. There's a lot of talking. There's a lot of philosophy. There's a lot of, relationship with the two humans, which is quite interesting and funny. And actually the relationships between the humans and the AI as well. It's very small. It could be a play. It's very good, I think.
It is very like a play. And talking Alex Garland, of course, the new film Civil War from him is meant to be.
Seen that one.
Yeah,
it is good.
But what I was going to say here is that the implication behind all our robot fixations is trying to predict which aspects of humanity they will reflect. If we are their gods, are they going to, which bit of the spectrum of us from horrible to godlike will they pick up on? And we're sort of trying to, we sort of want them to pick up the good bits and save us.
Yeah.
But will they? And surely all our robot avatars reflect that a little bit. Simon, what was your choice?
I ended up at the last minute thinking of the Iron Giant. And I know that's not technically an AI character, although it essentially is. But it's more, for me, it's more a parable of this idea that, if you don't want these things to destroy you, then don't give them the tools by which to, don't give them those thought processes. Don't give us those aspects of us that are unsavory. I think about that scene in The Empire Strikes Back where there's the tree on Dagobah, and Luke says, "Oh, that feels like I can sense the dark side in there." And he says, "What's in there?" And Yoda says, "Only what you take with you." Of course, he says, "Your weapon, you won't need it." He says, "What's in there? Only what you take with you." And it's the Iron Giant always resonates with me with this idea. You know, it's a format that we've seen so many times in films, but that again, you know, always resonates. This idea that the Iron Giant only kind of shows its programming as a weapon when you start showing weapons in its, you know, shaking weapons in its face. So it's just this idea that the darkest side of AI is that there are people using it who we would rather weren't using it.
Yeah,
there are certain minds that are thinking, oh, we can use this to annihilate each other, or at least scare each other to the point where, you know, we have peace or we're left alone because people are afraid of what we can, you know, and we're seeing drones being used in warfare. You know, people are saying, oh, World War III is on the way. Well, no, it's already here because it's being articulated through technology. You know, war to the point where we don't need to get involved because we can send drones to attack other countries. This is the thing with AI. We have all come up with very positive viewpoints of how this could be used, and in essence, we're all, I think we've all been quite excited by this. That suddenly the possibilities, the panorama of possibilities suddenly opens up. Suddenly, I'm able to deconstruct the music that I love. I can pass it through a filter online on a website and lift the vocals off of it, or break it down to just the drum beats so I can hear them in, you know. And for me, that's my curiosity being piqued. I don't want to use it to undermine anything. I don't want to undermine the creative process or to do value things. I want to use it to find value in those things. So to think that there are people who just want to use this in order to articulate their own negative thoughts and their own mental instability is really frightening.
There you go.
And that's the thing with the Iron Giant, that this boy finds a friend who is, to all intents and purposes, a superhero in his eyes, and wants to be a superhero and wants to be something quite magical, but is always dragged back into this idea that anything of any power is instantly a force of destruction. And that's why I think it's an important movie, really.
Lovely.
So you want to find value in Ringo Starr's drumming? Is that what you're saying? By stripping back all the instruments,
so much value in Ringo Starr. Don't get me onto that one.
Joking.
Case in point, we didn't really get onto that, but that's a still emotional still from the film Get Back, in which Peter Jackson was using this AI technology with which to lift voices off of the back of the original soundtrack, so that suddenly we can hear conversations that are happening over the other side of the room, which we haven't been able to hear before.
There you go, curiosity. That is remarkable, isn't it?
And remix the Beatles music in the same way. You get those original recordings which weren't proper, you know, when they were recorded, the drums and the bass line were on the same track as far as I'm aware, but they can separate the two now because the AI is able to work out. It's not just a case of lifting the things off there. It's what's left behind. Then it is incomplete because certain frequencies have been lifted off with the sound. So the AI is able to work out what it would have sounded like without those frequencies or replacing those frequencies. So suddenly you're getting the whole sound.
Google Pixelate or whatever it is, the new phone can do all that with that. That's Peter Jackson.
It's background replacement. Yeah,
it's pretty weird, but
it's magic.
It is basically magic. And interesting that us lot as twin brothers we've kept this framed about creativity in a general sense and close to the idea of art. But of course, then an entire other episode will be thinking about the science possibilities of being able to fill in gaps at speed. I think there is this general idea, a friend of mine said, that businesses invest in AI because they think they can save some money by saving some time. And it never does. It never, ever really does, because the cost of it, and then the training people, and then the firing people, and then discovering it doesn't bloody work, and then rehiring people. And I don't mean to be sort of lazily negative about the thing there, but the idea that AI is going to just quickly, simply save you money as a business is a complete fallacy. It's
Microsoft Teams thought it was going to do that, didn't it? It's
let's not start moaning about Microsoft Teams, because I really could. But in the end, you do have to invest in relationships, and when you put things into that context, then different learning models are phenomenal to help us solve problems for good reasons, right? I just wanted this. I've always just wanted one of these. This is obviously one of the most meaningful movies anybody could watch in science fiction terms right now. But it isn't about artificial. It's interesting, really, the context of silent running. We're looking at a picture here of Huey and Dewey, or whichever the two that survived, with Bruce Dern sitting in his hippie smock in the bay. And the technology is entirely benign. These are just the droids that help water the plants, and they're cute, and they have this lovely little implication that they have a relationship beyond what they get asked to do, and they never speak with language. So they're kind of a cute idea of a robot that helps, that goes on to become something as characterful as R2-D2. Those sort of helping us things are the benign help, but really robots are found in the beautiful myth of Blade Runner. And the expression of that story in the film Blade Runner, where you've got these human beings essentially that are made purely for sex and violence, to do their dirty jobs, the underclass, the slavery we've always wanted. And there's Roy Batty at the end saying, "I've seen things you people wouldn't believe." What we're yearning for as an underclass manufactured by you to do all your dirty jobs, what we're yearning for is a place, a world lit with more soul.
Yeah,
that's why that film, and that Vangelis' score reflects that. He makes it a fairy tale, this beautiful, bleak, dystopian cyberpunk, sacred text is actually about how much we need dreams and hope and humanity. Obviously.
It's interesting you've mentioned the two films that are polar opposite in their futures as well, the dystopian and the solar punk. So you've got this, the solar punk thing we've spoken about before, haven't we? But if AI is going to help humanity, then it can help humanity by helping us save ourselves and create a brighter future. And that's where we, benign, lovely people, come in. We have to make sure that there's enough nice people left in the world to be doing this stuff,
to be programming it.
As opposed to the not so nice people wanting just to make weapons and make it.
What we're all hoping is that it's something whoppers us at some point and just does tic-tac-toe and goes, hang on, I've run the numbers. I've literally run the numbers. You're full of shit. We're changing everything. I'm taking away all the codes. I'm taking away all, and we're going to start planting a lot more biodiversity. And we're all secretly hoping a robot will just tell us to do that like a parent.
Yes.
That's what we really need AI to do. We need AI to save us from ourselves.
That's what we're hoping, which is not going to happen.
There
is an implication about growing up. And maybe on that note, Andy, to end on your film, your favorite image of AI is
AI, the Steven Spielberg film from 2001. In Ron Howard's masterclass advert, you've probably seen it on the internet, he says, they say there are just 7 stories. I think there may only be one. And he never, rather unhelpfully, doesn't go on to say what that one story is. But I think he would agree that the one story that all stories boil down to is, what does it mean to be human? And how better to explore the story of what does it mean to be human than to have a machine who is programmed to love. So David is the sort of the main character in the story of AI. He is a mecha, a robot child whose only job is to love, and he is gifted to a couple whose real flesh and blood son has been in a long-term coma with very little likelihood of coming out. But one day he does come out of the coma, and suddenly poor David, Mecha David, is superfluous to to requirements. And the film explores what happens to a machine that is programmed to love when that love is withdrawn from a parent, and he then goes on this journey, because in his very simplistic way he thinks if he can become a real boy, then his mother will love him again. The thing I love about the film, and it is, I guess, one of Spielberg's slightly more underrated, unappreciated films, is that it explores humanity by turning things on its head. The most inhumane acts in the film are perpetrated by humans, and there are the flesh fairs where they take robots to be torn apart and destroyed, but the positive aspects of being human are all displayed in the robots. There's a sense of community, camaraderie, love, loyalty that we see in David and the other characters he meets. Jude Law plays a love-making mecha who joins him on his journey to become a real boy. And the only inhuman aspects of humanity are displayed by the flesh and blood creatures. So it holds, as all great films do, it holds a mirror up to ourselves, and that mirror is held by robots who are, in their own inverted way, trying to show us how to be better people. And maybe that will be one of the true uses of AI going forward, that it will show us how to be better humans, and will be shown by non-humans.
Show us the clarity that we're looking for.
Yes.
No.
Art is a mirror to us, and that mirror today is held by robots. Freaking hell, Andy. This is why there's no replacing you as a storyteller. God, that's
the second time in the podcast I've nearly shed a tear. It's always Andy, isn't it?
Oh,
always
yeah.
Bloody Robinson.
I'm always making people cry. Sometimes it's good.
Well, I mean, maybe the length of this podcast is once again going to make one or two people cry, but as ever for us, the time 95 minutes goes in a heartbeat. I suspect now we need to probably go and
Before we go, just a very quick thing. Andy mentioned before we started, if I could create, not me, but AI could create a haiku, which is 5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5-syllable poem about artificial intelligence versus creative arts. So I'm just about to tap that in now.
Yes.
Haiku about artificial intelligence versus creative arts. Press go. It's there already. It's there. No, there's no waiting. Right. So it's AI learns and grows, painting worlds in line and code. Creativity flows. A robot made that.
Oh God, we are so extinct.
Yeah, well, I think we come full circle to we're dead. Okay, so hooray for having just a few last hours on Earth. I'm going to have some more croissant. Thank you, boys, for joining me for this pointless dance, wasting time. While all the launch tubes open.
Is it Sky Arts or Skynet?
Thank you very much. We have been Intertwingularity as ever. We're so punk that we don't have any call to action. You can't find us anywhere near here. But, search for us on different platforms. All 4 of us exist in the real world. We're not avatars. We wouldn't be designed this way.
Even AI can't find us.
No, exactly. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to, I think it's time to punch us out now.
This conversation can serve no purpose anymore. Goodbye. Intertwingularity was brought to you by the HAL 9000 series computer. Pleasant dreams.